Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and you have tuned into the Rebel News live stream on this, a Friday, February 19th, 2021. And ho, look who it is. It's not Ezra Levent. He's on a very important assignment right now, and he wasn't able to make the show. So here I am, David Menzies, my usual tag team partner. That would be Sheila, the She-Devil Gun Reed. She's also on an assignment. See, we're doing a lot of hard work, unlike the mainstream media that are typing out stories in their basement. So subbing in for Sheila is Keean, the boy wonder Bexte in Calgary. Keean, how are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm great, David. I love waking up every morning to you and your nicknames. They bring a spark of joy to my life.
You will despise it at first, then you will accept it, then you will embrace it. That's what happened with my nickname, my friend. So that's the general rule of thumb of a nickname. And you don't get to choose your own nickname either. That's another rule as well. But Keean, we have so many wonderful stories to talk about. I think at this point, Sheila usually does her shtick of saying what we're ostensibly hoping to accomplish here, one of those being airing Super Chats. And I also understand from Mr. Producer, we already have, holy smokes, a $200 Super Chat on the front burner that we got to get to right away. So, Keean, tell the folks who are new to the live stream what it is we're doing here.
Yeah, so the purpose of this live stream, as it is every day, is to chat with you folks and to talk about the news as it happens. Sometimes it's breaking, sometimes it just happened yesterday. There's lots of interesting stuff to get to, and there's lots of stuff that you guys might want us to talk about, and the best way to do that is through a super chat. It's a great way to support us and the work that our other colleagues are doing while we're here chatting with you guys, actually having a great time. So Gary Stead actually started us off with a $200 donation. I appreciate that. He didn't have a message. He just, wanted to support the cause. And I appreciate that, Gary. Wow. If you ever want to grab a coffee, let me know.
Hey, folks, don't be shy, especially if you're going to give us a supersized super chat. Surely there's something you want to, get off your chest. I mean, there's no shortage of outrages these days. But Gary, that is so generous. And, Keean, as we've said to the folks, this is how we keep the lights on. I think it is the most honest way of fundraising. If you like what we're doing here, please support us. If you don't like what you're doing here, guess what? You still get the goods. And I understand there are people during this horrible lockdown we've been going through almost a year now that might not have any kind of expendable funds. But you compare that to the mainstream media, which does a direct withdrawal on your paycheck every 2 weeks, whether it's print media, Maclean's magazine, the CBC, of course, being the bottomless pit at about $1.5 or $1.6 billion. They just take it away from you. And also, if you notice, folks, you read some of the stories in mainstream media, CBC is notorious for this, they don't let you weigh in. Keean, I always found that amazing. Your money is good enough for them to fund that bureaucracy and that slanted view of the news. But when it comes to hearing from the great unwashed masses, the people they pickpocket every paycheck, oh, no, we're not interested. Comments for this article have been disabled.
Yeah, no, I don't even think they think it's your money that's fundraising them. These elites are, like, they think that it's their God-given right to have the money that the budget that they get. How much is it at this point? Is it 1.5 billion? It's in the billions, right? Like, it's 9 figures. That's how much we give the state broadcaster, and they don't give you the common courtesy. They don't give you the courtesy to even, be allowed to comment on their articles. So it's, obviously they're just a disgrace. Talking about them makes my blood boil. Mark Owens sent in some super chats. He says, please tell Trudeau I said, and then it's the middle finger emoji. So I will do that, sir. I will.
You know what, Keean? If it's the middle finger emoji, Trudeau is going to feel like back in old times in the 1970s when Trudeau gave Western Canadians the middle finger salute. So I guess we're keeping it in the family, that kind of sign language.
Exactly. And speaking of emojis, and this actually wasn't on the show agenda today. I don't know if the producer's going to be able to pull this up in time, but there's new emojis coming I don't know if you use emojis, David, but there's hundreds of them, and they add a few every now and then. And the new ones that are coming out are faces with masks on them, and I'm they're trying to normalize this. They want the pandemic to be forever.
You're 100% right, Keean. And that is a trend, we picked up on very early when you saw, for example, sports teams putting their logos and their team names on masks. So, if you're a Calgary Flames fan, hey, look at this, I got, flames coming out of my mouth. Isn't that cool? I absolutely refuse to normalize mask culture like that. And I'm not going to pay, God forbid, extra because these companies have to have a licensing fee, of course, to use registered trademarks. The only mask I've ever used is our very own one that we sell. It's a little on the pricey side, but you get what you pay for, which are masks are useless. Do we have a shot of that, Justin? Maybe you can search for that. It's on our great Rebel News store. And, I often think, Keean, what do people think when they see someone wearing that mask? Are we identified as part of the mask choice community, or do they think we're being purposely ironic to make a humor statement?
Choice.
But there
That's
you
very
go.
funny. The mask choice community. I like that.
Yeah, because so often these people are described, Keean, as anti-maskers, and they're not. If you want to wear a mask, see, unlike the other side, which demands mask compliance and the COVID Karens will get all over you if you don't do it and shame you, they're saying you want to wear a mask, you want to pretend it's Halloween 365 days a year, go for it. Me, I want to live my life without wearing a mask because the vast majority of these deaths are in long-term care facilities amongst elderly people, typically with a medical condition, and shutting down this economy and now preaching double and even triple masking.
Oh, yeah. It's stunning.
Oh, Keean, you go into your local...
I guess you could call these people pro-choice, hey?
I know, you go to your local Petro-Canada. Can you imagine? They're behind like a centimeter thick shield. The clerk, she's still wearing a mask. I don't know why when you're behind a shield. You're obliged to wear a mask. Now the pro-mask people want you to triple layer or quadruple layer. God forbid you're buying a $6.49 ticket and she's asking if you want to play encore because it's like... it's like the Charlie Brown teacher talking. Yeah. I just nod and but anyways, as you saw, folks, that is the mask we're selling. It's $25. It's not cheap, but wow, if you want to wear, sometimes, Keean, they say wear your politics on your sleeve. How about wearing your politics right on your mouth and telling people who force you to wear this that masks are indeed useless. So that is the only fancy dance mask I'll ever put on my face. And it's not by choice. Sometimes, Keean, we have to go into a thing like an airport and they don't care about mask exemptions. They'll kick you out. God forbid, we certainly don't need another reason for the authorities to kick us out of everywhere. So sometimes we'll do that kind of compliance. And that is indeed the mask I wear.
Yeah, and it says masks are useless. I'm going to have to talk to the store guy because I actually like wearing masks when when I was in Hong Kong and people were wearing masks to hide from the government. It wasn't because there was a plague going around, right? It's actually, there's one utility for a mask, and it is stopping facial recognition software, which is everywhere, by the way, even if you don't know it's looking at you. Whenever you go to a mall, they know exactly who you are and what stores you've gone to. I really like wearing a mask for that reason. It's nice to be able to go out and not have the government know that you've gone to the movie theater on a Tuesday.
You know what? I never even thought of that, and you're absolutely right, Keean. And isn't it so perverse how the year has changed in the space of 12 months? A year ago, if I walked into a bank with a mask on, the manager's already pressing the silent alarm. Today, you walk into the bank without a mask on, and the COVID teller, Karen, is screaming at you to mask up. I mean, geez, what happened to the old normal so quickly?
I wonder when we will get back to normal. How many years do you think it will be before you walk around with a mask on and people look at you a little strange, like, what are you doing?
Keean, that is the question. It's a great question. I don't know what the answer is, but I can tell you already the PR campaign has started in light of the vaccinations going out. I remember several weeks ago, the New York Times had a prominent story, which was even when all of America is vaccinated, here are the good reasons why you should still wear a mask. And I'm thinking, what? I thought I'm getting jabbed by this needle, so I don't have to put up with this BS anymore. And they're still maintaining, I guess better safe than sorry. I don't understand that, Keean.
No, I don't get it at all. I remember when I was going to the airport, back January last year, maybe February, and I was wearing a mask, and people were like, "What are you doing, man? Like, why are you wearing a mask?" And I was thinking that the COVID was going to be worse than it was, so I was kind of freaking out. And I just can't wait to get back to that kind of day, when people think that masks aren't the standard. They're just sort of your own choice.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I go back a few years ago. I went to, it was the last Argo game to be played at Skydome. Folks, I refuse to call it the Rogers Centre. Here's something that cost $650 million to build, which was slightly over the original projection of $150 million. This is what happens when you get government involved. And old man Rogers was able to buy it lock, stock, and barrel for $25 million. Yeah, the only piece of downtown Toronto real estate that depreciated by 95% in 20 years. But anyway, we were trying to prove a point of how there was always this double standard with masks. And I had a friend wear a burqa, completely concealed her identity, and then I wore a balaclava. Well, guess who got ejected from the stadium? But now they want everybody to mask up. So that masking policy that Rogers once upon a time enforced by expulsion from the stadium, it no longer exists. The contrary does. Keean, sometimes when I think about this, my mind just explodes.
The type of journalism you've done, David, over the course of your life, the style of it, it truly is deserving of the Order of Canada.
Oh, surely you jest. And before you talk about an Order of Canada for any of us, let's get it into the hands of Don Cherry. He is so deserving, but, the Laurentian elites, not a chance will they ever give this man his due. But speaking of giving a man his due, how about Pastor James? This is just a despicable story in Alberta, Keean, and we are, going to stick to this story like a starving dog on a bone. Maybe the mainstream media doesn't want to cover it, or maybe the mainstream media is cheerleading for a pastor to be jailed in a horrible correctional facility and a church to be shut down. But that's not our bag. So before I get into it, I think we might have a clip from our beloved colleague, Sheila Gunn-Reid, about what this story is about. And I think it's one of the most important civil liberties cases in Canada going on right now.
Today I want to bring you an update to the case of Pastor James Coates of Grace Life Church west of Edmonton, Alberta. In Spruce Grove, in fact. Now, Grace Life has been the site of ongoing Christian resistance to the medical tyranny of the public health orders that restrict public gatherings, including our religious services. You see, in Alberta, religious services are limited to just 15% of the church's capacity. All this to stop the spread of COVID case counts, even though these case counts have plummeted drastically, and hospitalizations are down to less than half of what they were a month ago. All this without vaccines. When Grace Life Church refused to turn away congregants to meet that arbitrary 15% of capacity rule, and when the church did not force its congregants to wear masks during service, the church was put under weekly surveillance by local police and Alberta Health Services inspectors. Pastor James Coates received a $1,200 fine for violating the public health order. And then eventually, when Pastor James continued to defy that 15% restriction, an executive order from the Chief Medical Officer of Health to close the church was issued. Now, that piece of paper meant nothing to a congregation and a pastor that are compelled by their faith to gather together to worship every single week. And so they've continued. Now, 2 Sundays ago, Pastor James was arrested in his office for holding services. He was released, and the following Sunday, he again held service while local RCMP waited outside. However, the police did not arrest Pastor James again last Sunday. Instead, they asked him to come and turn himself in on the following business day. Now, Rebel News had an exclusive interview with Pastor James Coates after his sermon this past Sunday, something he has not granted to the mainstream media. And let me just say, I'm grateful for his trust, and I appreciate the trust of his congregation to be able to tell their side of the story accurately. As I reported then in a previous video, Pastor James Coates is currently in jail. He turned himself in on Tuesday morning in obedience to God and in resistance to tyranny. And that's where Pastor James remains.
You know, Keean, there's so many angles to digest here, but the first thing I want to do, and, you know, I did a monologue when I was filling in for Ezra's show a couple of weeks ago about this. It's the so-called science behind the Wuhan virus, and how science, I guess, like gender these days, is fluid. The science is, you know, appropriated by those who want a specific conclusion to their political point of view, and they use science to prove it, when, of course, science and politics are no two things that are more incompatible than that. I mean, the ultimate oxymoron is, of course, political science. And what I'm getting at is, right off the bat, the religious services in Alberta are limited to 15% of a building's fire code capacity. And, Keean, as you know, earlier this month, we had the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay, and the capacity there was roughly 30%. They allowed 22,000 tickets to be sold, and they put 30,000 cardboard cutouts to make it look full. Here's the deal. Does the Wuhan virus hate more than 15% capacity in Alberta, but will tolerate 30% capacity in Florida?
No, and this is why it's insane, right? And it's a very similar argument to, like, should we be, when oil is going to be burned or coal is going to be burned somewhere in the world, we might as well produce it here in Canada, right? A similar argument, although, you know, it's a little different, a similar argument can be made. The virus is spreading at our closest neighbor like you could not believe, and it is spreading. The virus does exist. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but the virus is being brought back and forth across the border in huge numbers, because and it's not by the people that you think, right? Like, it's not the travelers that are going on vacation. It's, you know, truckers. They have the exact same immune systems as we do, and they bring it back and forth, and they make up about 90% of the border traffic. But for some reason, Justin Trudeau's focusing on the 10% who want to get away from their very, you know, dull lives right now because they're all locked up at home. It doesn't make sense to say that, you know, we should shut down everything when we're still importing the virus from the United States. Why should we not be able to live our lives, worship our religions, our gods? And it doesn't make any sense to me why we are doing this to ourselves when the virus is going to continue to spread no matter what we do.
And I just think too, Keean, there's certain people in government, certainly certain people in the bureaucracy, that just, they hate religion, period. And I say that in reference to, going back to last spring, the Church of God in Elmer, Ontario. They, to me, it was total compliance with the bylaw. They had families isolate in vehicles and take in the sermon in the parking lot via a radio frequency. And I kid you not, about 300 meters down the road, Keean, there's a no-frills store that's packed to the rafters. You know, but you couldn't do that in their church. And yet, what was bylaw concerned with? What was the Elmer Police Force concerned with? Clamping down on the Church of God. So I think there's an anti-religious bias out there. And, you know, I would really like to know, if I had the ear of your Premier, Mr. Kenney, what he thinks of this, because this doesn't seem by the board to me, this clampdown of religious freedoms in Alberta, of all places.
You know, Kenney has spoken out, I believe. I just read a headline. I didn't read an article, so I'm just going off what I read there, and maybe Justin can pull it up, but I think Jason Kenney called for the release of the pastor, which would be in line with my expectations of him and sort of his past behavior when it comes to religious freedoms. When you think about Jason Kenney's history as a Minister of Immigration and Jobs and Defense Premier asked to release a jailed pastor. When you look back at all of his work, some of the most proud things that he's done is fought for the religious liberties and social liberties of people around the world. From his time in federal politics all the way down to where he is now, this is one of Jason Kenney's passions, and fighting for a pastor in his own province isn't too hard for him to do. It's totally in line with his ideology and his past work. Although the problem is he's not in charge of he's not in charge of and maybe this is as much evidence as we need. He can't go and say to these RCMP officers who went and arrested him, don't arrest them, this person in particular. He can't say that. What he can do and what he should do is change the law. That's completely in his ability. And this my producer's reaching out to me saying that article actually said, and this is where you should read that more than just the headline. It's actually them asking the Premier to do this. Okay, so the Premier, I was wrong. The Premier has not asked for the release. This is a bad headline. This is a very bad headline. The Premier has not asked for the release of this jailed pastor. He should do that. And now that I know that, I'm going to follow up with him, his team, and maybe get on one of these press conference calls to ask exactly why he hasn't done this, because that is a terrible shame if he hasn't done that. That's the bare minimum I would expect from him. And what I want from him is for him to change the law so that this doesn't happen to the next pastor or, to anyone who is going about their daily lives, their daily constitutional rights, and they shouldn't be thrown in prison, much less the prison that he's in right now. David, you have more information on this than I do, I think, about the specific living conditions that he's living under right now, and who are the people that he's bunking with.
Oh, I believe Ezra has actually visited that prison for a different story way back when, and I know what Ezra said is you definitely do not want to be anywhere near this prison, especially confined within its walls. But you said something earlier, Keean, about the civil liberties, and this is a point I want to harp on. Where is the Canadian Civil Liberties Association? It looks like they're sitting this one out too. As you know, since this Wuhan virus pandemic began, we've had the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. It's almost a fetish, I think, about getting people released from correctional institutions. Some of them violent, some of them sex offenders. In order to embrace, I kid you not, folks, social distancing. And the perversity here, Keean, is that it seems to be we're emptying the jails of the real criminals in Canada so we can have more room for, pastors, restaurateurs, store owners, boutique owners. I mean, we got to create enough space for them to, and I'm not exaggerating. The Attorney General here in Ontario has sent threatening letters out to the owners of Claudia's Closet and Noble Toys. Can you imagine a little boutique and a little toy store in Bolton saying you risk imprisonment if you have the temerity to open your doors again? It's that right there in writing. And meanwhile, violent offenders are running free. Give me a break. So where is the Canadian Civil Liberties Association on this? Where is the Conservative Party of Canada? I still, shake my head about this, Keean. This is a lob ball over home plate that they can hit out of the ballpark. And they've taken a silence, a vow of silence that would make a monk blush. So, it's kind of defaulted to us to stand up for these people because the usual suspects, they're sitting this out.
Totally. I mean, we have done more work on this file, and I'm looking every day to try and find another example of people sticking up for the most downtrodden people in our society right now. And it is business owners, small business owners, who are struggling to put food on their children's table, who are going to bed crying every night because they know that everything they've worked for in their entire lives is vaporizing over the course of weeks and months when they can't do their regular business, whether they own a small town theater or whether they own a restaurant in downtown Calgary. Everyone in that sort of niche of society is struggling right now, and no politician seems to care, and no liberties group seems to care except for us, and I don't know why that is, and it's eternally frustrating for me. But there's a few super chats about this.
Okay.
Should I get to the super chat? I should get to the super chats. We've sort of okay, so they're piling up. Holy man,
That's good.
So Joe says. Toronto Peel have strictest measures in the world. Yeah, that's, I mean, at least in Canada, I think. I don't know specifically. Alex says,
and Keean, if I might add in case anyone should think that Joe's exaggerating, can anyone think of another city in the world where the mayor dispatched the mounted unit to a restaurant for opening its doors?
That was crazy, hey?
Oh, seriously, Keean, even in dictatorships, has that happened? I don't think so. So, way to go, Mayor Tory. Assuming you're in the city and not at your multi-million-dollar mansion in Florida. But anyhow, continue.
That was stunning to watch. I was like sitting in my home in Calgary, thinking like, oh my God, is this in Toronto? They're just bowling through protesters, knocking them over with their trusty steeds. It's insane to see.
Yeah, I guess there's no reason for me to go to Calgary and take in the stampede. I just have to go to an illegal restaurant opening, right?
Exactly, David. Exactly. Alex says, Keean and David, you guys are badass. I love when jerks ask Keean what he knows about the energy industry, and then he tells them he literally has a degree. Wish you all the best, fellows, and Rebel Crew. Yeah, actually, I don't get to use it very often, but when it's a climate change extremist like Greta Thunberg trying to tell me that we're destroying the world, I'm kind of like, I don't know about that. And actually, I just did a video. Actually, this is a perfect segue into one of my recent videos.
Okay.
On solar panels in Alberta and what is going on in Texas right now and how these things connect. Right now in Texas, obviously, they're experiencing a cold snap. It'll be gone soon, but they weren't prepared for it at all. And they weren't prepared for it in part because they bought in a little bit to the Green New Deal strategy of relying too much on green energy, wind turbines, solar energy, that kind of thing. And wouldn't you know, both of those two things fail when it gets too cold. Wind turbines freeze, oil starts leaking out of them when the fluid starts freezing. The solar panels get covered in snow, and that's exactly what happened in Alberta. The solar plant near Innisfail was covered in snow. Now we expect snow falls. We expect it to fall. Solar plants expect it to fall, but you would think that after a week, 2 weeks, someone would care enough maybe to go brush it off. But no, in Innisfail, a power plant that cost millions and millions of dollars, it had a rated power output of 22 megawatts. That's a large, it's not hundreds of megawatts, but it's big. It could power a town, parts of a city, and it was sitting at 2 megawatts in output. It was reduced to 10% of its operating capacity for 2 weeks because it was covered in snow. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is talking, on Twitter to the people whose lives are being destroyed in Texas, saying, "Ha, I told you so. You should have bought into my Green New Deal." Well, Alex, if we bought into your Green New Deal anymore, people would be dying in larger numbers because of what's going on here. They'd be freezing for longer and freezing more frequently because solar panels don't heat homes.
By the way, where do we get the cash to buy into this Green New Deal? I think the last estimate I saw, Keean, was somewhere in the neighborhood of 68 trillion. Yes, trillion with a T dollars. So I don't think AOC, forget about a degree in energy management, I don't think she has a degree in economics.
Mm-hmm. Totally. She's a cocktail waitress, and for some reason people trust her to like actually negotiate government policy and sit on committees. I'll never understand it. I just don't get it. Anyways, Chad Duggan says, "Hey Boy Wonder, please touch on the Coke Jails hotels because I had a tattoo planned from an international artist for 3 years, and now because of our crap prime minister, I have to forfeit my huge deposit. Wow. That's insane. That's an interesting story too. So you were going to bring in a tattoo artist to this country to do, wow, that I didn't know people did that, first off.
Wow.
So that's impressive.
That must be one hell of a tattoo. I bet it's better than something like an anchor with mum written on it or something like that. You know what? I'd like to ask that viewer if he can send in to our tips line, Keean, more details. I think that's a fascinating story. Like you, I never even thought that was a thing, flying in a tattoo artist.
Yeah. Send an email to us at tips@rebelnews.com and headline tattoo on the subject line, make it tattoo artist. I'll find that and I'll take a peek at it. That's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that with us. Justin Beaver says the peaceful Jericho March in Edmonton this coming Saturday, Antifa and BLM are saying they will be there to disrupt it. What world do we live in? That's a good question. So
let me get this straight. Antifa all of a sudden is pro big government and pro lockdowns. I mean, do they even know which lane they're driving in these days, Keean?
They're driving squarely in the fascist lane. They always have been. And they obviously they don't want to acknowledge it because, they say they're anti-fascist, but they are fascists at the end of the day. There's no other word to describe the actions of people who go into the streets and beat and try to kill reporters, people who go and firebomb people's homes, raid police stations, tear down courthouses. This is what fascists do. We know this. This is very basic grade 10 social studies.
100%.
And the federal government is very quick to acknowledge terrorist groups.
Yes.
But they will not acknowledge that Antifa is one. Why is that? And also why this will forever be a thorn in my side. Why didn't Donald Trump just do it? He said he would. He talked about it a lot. Antifa are terrorists. They should be labeled terrorists by the FBI and by the RCMP, by every single intelligence agency in the Western world. They are terrorists. They are a risk to our social security, the social fabric of our society, and they should be in prison. The ones that act on their violent intent, they should be in prison.
I agree. And Keean, I mean, can we at least have some truth in advertising? Don't call yourself Antifa, which is a contraction of anti-fascist. Just call yourself FA for fascist, because that's what you are. As Keean said, you claim to denounce fascism, but you embrace all the tools of fascism, including violence. And you're right, this is a complete misstep that we let these cretins get away with their so-called mostly peaceful protesting.
Yeah, so, I agree, David. So, Brakuthor says, I'm against mandatory masking, but it's super irresponsible to say they're useless. According to a 2013 study I read, they reduce spread by about 14%. Yeah, I don't know what the exact reduction is. And Ezra had... he wrote a book, which you can actually still get, about the China virus and Justin Trudeau's involvement with it. And there's one line in it that really sticks out to me that I still remember now, and it is that if you have the common sense to understand that you should cover your sneeze with your elbow or whatever, you would know that masks have some sort of effect at curbing the spread of airborne illness. Now, what that, how much that is, that's you can debate that, but they obviously, I think, and this is where I disagree, I think, with a lot of the people at Rebel News, but I think that they have some sort of utility when it comes to not getting people sick. I haven't read the studies behind it. I'm using my gut when I say that, but I think that there's some amount of utility to them, whether they're as perfect as at a barrier of spread as Dr. Tam would have us believe. I don't know if that's the case. And the problem is this struggle we all have is that we were gaslit at the start of this pandemic by the very people in power who we're supposed to trust now. And they said masks don't work. And when they said masks don't work, everyone who was a government dissident, like, me and David and everyone who watches Rebel, were like, obviously masks work. How stupid can you be, Dr. Tam? And then she started saying masks work, and then we're like, do they work? So there's like, this is such an interesting, political scientists should really look at how this like change happened over time, because there was a change when all of a sudden people thought masks worked. And then they said masks don't work, and it corresponded exactly with when the people in power sort of changed their tune. And I'm not standing up for the people in power, because they are absolute incompetence for saying it two ways and then saying, oh, now you should double mask. Now you should wear 3 masks. Like, who are these people at the CDC? Who are these people at the Canadian Public Health Agency? And why are they changing their tune in sync with each other around the world? Are they all doing independent research that all just happens to come out at the exact same time, so that they were able to tell us definitively, yes, you shouldn't have worn 2 masks yesterday, but today 2 masks will definitely save you? And I know that 2 months ago we said don't wear any masks, but you should go with the latest science, right? It's there. How could we possibly have any trust in these people?
Yeah, forgive me if I doubt the credibility of Dr. Tam, Keean. I mean, Dr. Tam would have us believe that men can have babies. Remember that infamous pregnant people thing?
Exactly.
But to me, this is the proof in the pudding. And I've talked to people in the mask business. As you know, the vast majority of these masks are non-medical masks. And that's a very important distinction, because no surgeon would be wearing one of these cockamamie masks, including the one we sell, because the micron measurement is large enough to let the virus particle to come into the mask. So the moment I heard the phrase non-medical mask, well, that to me doesn't fill my sails with confidence.
What is the purpose for it, if not for medicine, if not for the medical purpose of a mask? What could possibly be the reason, other than submission to the government or wanting to evade facial recognition?
And you know what, Keean, that's a very, I was talking when Ezra came out to one of the Toronto protests, we were talking about this, how when we were walking, it was a nice sunny January day, and there were young people, this was around Trinity Bellwoods Park area, and they're walking outdoors, and they're obviously, they're either by themselves or they're obviously that they're couples, and they're masked up outdoors. And in a demographic where you have a 6 times higher chance of getting killed crossing Queen Street than you do of the Wuhan virus. And, Ezra was very insightful as always, and he was saying, really what the mask is, it's almost the equivalent of, in the Muslim faith, of a woman wearing the hijab. It's an outward statement that I'm buying into a certain program. And the program they're buying into is, yes, we are pro-lockdown. Yes, we are pro-big government. And if you're in our group and you're not wearing this to be on side with our symbolism and our beliefs, then you will be excluded. You shall be shunned. I think that's really what's going on with all this mask wearing, Keean.
Yeah, and you're right about that. I mean, whenever I hop in an elevator with someone and they're not wearing a mask, I know immediately that I can talk to them about how stupid the world is that we're living in, and that they're probably a trustworthy person. It's an interesting thing to see, but if you're not wearing a mask, I generally trust you a little bit more. If you are wearing a mask, fine, it's totally your choice, and I agree with that. I wear a mask sometimes too, but the people that have the, I don't want to say audacity, but the mental self-awareness to not wear a mask while they're in public and in close quarters with people, because they know that, if Justin could pull up a graph of COVID cases right now in Canada, they're plummeting. There's people that we are acting like we are in a sort of a pandemic where you could get HIV just from being in the same room with someone, right? Like that's the severity that they're acting that this is. And it's like, look at that. We're going down a slide right now, and we're acting like those case numbers are 10 times what they are. They're minuscule, less than 5,000. Oh my God. We're not in pandemic. There's 4,000 people right now that should stay at home. That's what they should do. Problem solved.
You're absolutely right, Keean. And as I've said from the beginning, once we understood what this virus was all about and who it targets, the only stat that means anything to me is the death toll. And we know over 80% of the deaths, elderly in long-term care facilities, typically with a medical condition. In Ontario, I can tell you the number of people under 20 that have died, folks, 2. And both those people had severe medical complications. So children are virtually invulnerable to this disease, this virus rather. There's no reason, no rational reason to close down the schools and close down the overnight summer camps to this demographic. We should have, now that we know what the deal is, we should have targeted those long-term care facilities, some of which are atrocious. And 'twas ever thus, unfortunately. Every 5 or 10 years, Keean, there'll be an investigative journalism piece or a government inquiry going into some of these long-term care facilities, and the conditions are absolutely horrendous, and the government says, oh, this is unacceptable, this will not longer be tolerated, and then it's tolerated. That's where we should have directed our resources and our manpower, and as opposed to shutting down the economy and going back almost a year ago, do what Taiwan did, Keean, which was stop international air travel from coming into that country from virus hotspots. But we never did that. 5 to 10 flights from China per day coming in to Canada.
They never stopped.
No,
they never stopped, David.
Yep.
And Justin Trudeau's acting like he's pulling out all the stops, which is what is so infuriating to me. If we look at that graph, we're going down a slide right now, and what we need to do is we need to have red lines, just like Donald Trump had red lines. Yep. We need to have red lines. When it gets to a certain point, when are we going to give our heads a shake and say, okay, what? So what? There's 100 cases left. We're keeping the border closed, destroying lives every day. We're telling people they can't go on vacation. We're shunning them from our society because they go to Hawaii or something like that. They just want to live their lives. And different story for politicians who are pro-lockdown.
Oh, yeah.
But there's people who want to go to Palm Springs, right? And then they come back, and then their neighbor's like, "Why'd you go to Palm Springs? Don't you know that we're in a pandemic?" And then Justin Trudeau locks them up in a $2,000 for 3-night COVID jail. Why are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we accepting this when the case numbers are in free fall right now? At what point? Because they're going to try and continue what they're doing, right? The federal government is going to try and continue to act like we're in a pandemic, and at any moment, we could be back at 100,000 cases or something like that. And obviously, that's just a lie. That's a lie.
I'll give you another Ezra-ism, as I call them, and that was politicians of every level, of every political stripe, got a little taste during this pandemic of totalitarian power, and they kind of like that taste. And I don't think they want to give up these powers, and I don't think they want to give up the idea that they can limit our freedoms. I think that's the real pandemic right there.
People need to be looking at that graph every day so that they can see, oh, so we're actually like at 50% of the case count when back in September when we were told that a second wave was coming. Yeah. And what happened to that second wave? Well, there was no long-term health care crisis in this country. It just never happened. Yeah. The pictures that we were seeing in Wuhan and the videos we were seeing of people collapsing on the side of the street. Have you seen someone collapse on the side of the street from COVID? That's not a realistic understanding of this virus. Yeah. But we were brainwashed by Chinese propaganda early on in this pandemic to be told that this was a much bigger crisis. When we saw trucks driving through the streets, steam cleaning the roads with chemicals and spraying these disinfectants into the air, you saw that and you're like, wow, this could be serious. If China's taking it seriously like this, we should take it seriously. And then bada bing, bada boom, 4 months later, you have no rights and you're in jail. Yeah.
And you know what? This is a great segue. And I definitely want to get to your eco-radical story, Keean. But after you read a few super chats, I'm going to throw to a CBC story that was just published. And what it's about, folks, essentially is how can we even talk about the solutions and getting back to normal if we can't talk honestly about the virus? Because apparently it is verboten to mention that this virus originated out of China, So we'll get to that outrageous CBC story about a pub owner in London, Ontario that put up a sign that has the left losing their minds. But in the meantime, why don't we catch up on some of those super chats, Keean?
Yeah. Okay, so Brackthor says, I'm against mandatory masking, but we just read that. It's super responsible to say masks don't work. Radisson Hotel chain is now involved in UK quarantine hotels too. It's worth a serious investigation. Yes, that's a good idea. Jurgen says, you guys do realize it's not a vaccine, right? Which I don't know what vaccine you're talking about. There's several vaccines, and I think some of them have proven efficacy. So I don't know. Ken Tate says, Menzies, we love you. We love you. Oh, David, we love you. Well, there you go.
Thank you. I'm humbled.
Gary Stead sent us 10 smackers after he opened up this show with really big donations, and there was no comment there. So Gary, I don't know if you're trying to say something or not, but it's not coming through. You gotta type the message if you were trying to say something. If not, though, we appreciate the support.
We do.
Jurgen says, interview David Martin, please. He's legit. Mark says, Justin, can I get a guitar? There you go. I'm impressed with how fast he is on that key.
Oh, he lives for pressing that button. He just,
Dude,
it's like a child going into a toy store. He can hardly wait to get his hands on that guitar.
I love it. Okay, MK Ultra says, Canada has been trending authoritarian for decades. COVID only revealed that those in power are not as benevolent as had been assumed. Yeah, that's, if you could have a thesis for this whole conversation that we've had here on the show today, that's pretty much exactly it. Ray W says, all communists tried to block religion. Trudeau is no different. Bingo. Ken Tate says, good man, Jim Coates. What a man we desperately need, a man of uncompromising principles, 50 more like him nationwide, and it all ends. I don't know who Jim Coates is. I feel maybe I should. Maybe I'll sound silly saying that I don't know him. That's the pastor.
That is the pastor.
That's the pastor.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. So how many imams have been arrested? How many mosques closed? Alberta Dawn asked that question. I don't know. That's a good question. That's a very good question. Brackathor says, I'm amused how the religious are defying an authoritarian order because they feel they can't worship. They might go to hell by the authority of God. Yeah, and that's the conundrum that a lot of these really devout Christians have, and many other religions have, is they think they're balancing. Oh, should I defy this government which really has no godly authority, or should I go to hell for all of eternity? Now, whether you're religious or not, that is quite the qualm to have. Imagine thinking that you were going to you're facing eternal damnation because you don't go to church. Versus, what's the risk in that, right? Versus going to church and defying a government order. That's a very, very serious question that people are dealing with, whether you're religious or not. Kenny is turning into a O'Toole wannabe. He should go back to Ontario where he came from. Not a true Albertan. Kenny and Notley are equally crap. That's certainly an opinion. He is not what I expected he would be when he became premier, but comparing him to Rachel Notley is not. No, I don't think that's a fair comparison. Rachel Notley tried systematically to destroy the fabric of Alberta over the course of 4 years, and Jason Kenney, and Jason Kenney has done a good job at that. Don't get me wrong, with his restrictions and following in lockstep with Justin Trudeau's government when it comes to restricting our freedoms. But what Rachel Notley would have done in Jason Kenney's shoes right now over this pandemic would have been millions of times worse than anything Jason Kenney has done. We would still be in a lockdown. We would be in a situation worse than what Ontario is facing in the Peel region. Doug Ford times a million is what Rachel Notley would be. She is not Jason Kenney. I think that's safe to say.
I totally agree with you there.
Punko says Liberal leaked C-22 bill to CBC before presenting it to the House. Was it leaked to Rebel as well? I think you know the answer to that one. The federal government and all of the bureaucrats behind it do a really good job at leaking things to the CBC, especially when they know that we have it. So whenever we reach out to them to question them on a story, on a scoop that we have, they'll send that story to the CBC so the CBC can publish it quickly and give them soft landing so that they can frame the debate over that issue for the next month. And it's really frustrating to me because, we had this really great scoop on them wanting to move immigration hearings to be online and swearing in ceremonies to be online. And we thought that was crazy. We thought, like, wow, how can you be sure that they're taking this oath seriously? The oath to become Canadian is a serious one. You're pledging to be, you're pledging for the rest of your life to acknowledge that the Queen is, your rightful sovereign and a whole bunch of other things of what it means to be Canadian. And we're just trusting it for an online Skype conversation. It was crazy. So we reached out to them, and what do you know, just a couple days later the CBC published this crazy scoop that we had. Very frustrating, but the government they do it for a reason, because it works for them. Devin says, Keean, you mentioned the USC spreading to COVID to Canada. Why is it that no mask Florida has the third highest one-way U-Haul rentals with dropping cases and deaths? No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, like, I agree with you. I think that this is being overblown. I think the risks of having COVID are small. I think that if I had COVID, I would probably come out of it on top. And most people, 99% of people, are in that same boat. I'm not saying that them spreading it to us, like there's some hotbed or anything like that. It's just what it is. The virus spreads. It is a virus. Anyone with an understanding of epidemiology knows that viruses spread. That's just something that they do, and you can't stop it just because you vindictively target people who are going on vacation. 90% of the people who are crossing the border are coming as essential travelers, meaning they're driving a truck, or maybe they're reporters with the CBC, not with Rebel, because we're not essential apparently. Whatever it is, the essential travelers make up the bulk of it, and they're not immune to COVID. They're just as likely to get it as you and I, and they're as likely to spread it once they get back to Canada as you and I. So it just doesn't make sense why we're targeting people who are just going on vacation like they are the problem. They're not. And this virus is going to spread whether the border is open or closed. It doesn't matter.
Indeed, Keean, and I think the silver lining over the Christmas holidays, when we found all those MLAs jetting off to Hawaii, and of course Rod Phillips, the former Ontario Finance Minister, whipping down to St. Bart's, pre-recording videos, doing fireside chats, pretending he was an Ajax. Oh,
what a guy, hey?
But here's the silver lining. It's a good news story because the politicians of that level have the data at their fingertips. They realize what's what.
Mm-hmm.
And
Totally.
obviously the likes of Rod Phillips and other elected officials, they wouldn't put their family at risk if they thought that, the Wuhan virus was equivalent to Ebola. They know it's not dangerous. That's why they were buggering off to have fun in the sun. And so why can't the rest of us? That's what I say. Because obviously, I don't think Mr. Phillips, even though he's very sneaky, I don't think he would be so insidious that he would put his family and friends at risk if he knew the virus was, like I said, something horribly contagious and deadly like Ebola. But he knows he's not going to be harmed by that. So there you go.
Exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. T. Heard sent in a super chat. Didn't say anything, though. Appreciate it. Same with Karen Stoppel. And then Karen Stoppel actually followed that one up with another one. Said, mask-free hairdresser in Southern Alberta. Kudos to her. I'm not sure if that was Ralph Klein's niece or who that was.
Yes,
there's lots of them. I love them. And feel free to go frequent their establishments if that's one thing that conservatives need to do better. We boycott sometimes. We boycotted Tim Hortons, but what we really need to do is help businesses succeed that we know are going to be targeted by rabid leftists. If you have a business that is pro-freedom, and if you know of a business that is pro-freedom, anti-lockdown, pro-normalcy, go support them as much as you can, because it's important. Canadians are sitting on a huge amount of savings right now, and the federal government is trying to take it away from you. They're trying to find ways to tap into your savings. The best way for you to help yourselves right now is to help each other. And conservatives need to band together, help conservative businesses, go to them, support them, let them know that leftist boycotts aren't going to stop them from being able to operate and gain a livelihood in Alberta or any other province. Jim Pride says, French is the only official language of every province except for Quebec. French is the only official language of every... I don't get what you mean there, Jim. But, I don't know what you mean. Dave Deacon says masks work, but they must be full face, fit tested with biologic filters, changed regularly. But that would be too uncomfortable. Yeah, you're exactly right. You need to, when doctors go and scrub their nails and clean themselves to perfection before they go into surgery, there's a massive process between putting your mask on and then taking it off. There's so much work that needs to be done for you to make sure that you're not cross-contaminating things, cross-contaminating your hands with the outside of your mask, and then you're rubbing your face, scratching your eye, whatever it is. That's a massive problem with masks for sure. You're totally right about that. Ken Tate says, never have been in a pandemic, of course, nowhere near. I'm not sure at what point you said that or in what context it was, but did you know, David, that there's actually 2 pandemics going on right now? I was looking it up. There was actually an ongoing pandemic before this pandemic was called, and HIV is technically an ongoing global pandemic, which I think is an important thing for people to know, because when you think about it, we were in a pandemic before we were in this pandemic. So where were the lockdowns for the last pandemic? Where was the crisis? The people going to the grocery stores and buying up all the toilet paper. It just wasn't happening. What pandemic means is very subjective, and it's not that crisis that you see in the Hollywood movies every time. You could be in a pandemic and you wouldn't even know about it, and we were, in fact, before COVID spread around the world, we were in a pandemic, but nobody cared.
Well, I'll tell you, Keean, I've never been healthier. And I've been going to all the hotspots, the airports, long-term care facilities, the anti-lockdown protesters. Technically, I should be dead. Anyways, we got to blaze through these super chats.
Our producers in our ear saying we've got to plow through these. So Justin Beaver says BC dine-in allowed, no church. AB was no dine-in, but 15% of church, and wonder why people have conspiracy theories. Yeah, you're exactly right. Why should there be different standards in different provinces? And the virus seems to be going down everywhere. So why just have no standards? Why close down anything if the virus is going down? Justin Bieber, Don Ferguson sent him a super chat. So did Alan Plummer. Alan said masks and beards don't work. That's a good point. I heard that was a problem early on in the pandemic. Faust says, what's new for Cheesecake Nation? Is it mandatory for everyone to wear butt plugs now? Stay sane. Oh, God. That's something that the Chinese wanted to do, right? Like they were actually testing anal swabs for the virus for respiratory-borne illness. It didn't make any sense. I think it was one of those. It's more that Chinese propaganda that was coming out that probably wasn't happening. Desley Mendoza sent in $50. Thank you very much. We need to weigh risks and benefits. Masks work when they are used correctly. If not, it increases risks, i.e. adults who reuse contaminated masks and children who chew on their masks. Moisture works like a magnet for contaminants in the air. Great work, guys. Mr. Mendoza, exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Alex, everybody loves goalies, and they are always talkative guys with big personalities, but not surprised to learn Menzoid plays in net. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I was a goalie.
Oh, okay. Did you say that in this conversation? Did I miss it? Maybe you did.
No, I did. Obviously, someone's paying attention, but we got to keep going.
Our producer's saying we got to hurry up. John says, Justin, we're having a great time here. See Kenny's Facebook post regarding the pastor. Kenny must go. Daphne says $5 for my love. For Menzies, $5 for loving Keean's. He's got guts, and $5 for Justin. Please guitar. Ray W says Keean, at your age, 99% of under 65 have survival. Under 30 stone, that is. Yeah. So as long as you're not overweight. Pamela, $5. Karen, $10. Not King Ralph's niece, much further south. Shout out to Justin. Yeah, okay, so I'm curious to know exactly where that is. I need to go get my hair cut. And Paul Williamson sent in $60. I appreciate that, Paul. So that's it. That's it for the super chats. I think that's it for the show today, and we will be back next Monday.
We cannot go to overtime. The boss, we must surrender the studio too. So everybody have a great weekend. Thank you to all the super chatters, and in the meantime, stay sane.